I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Silka Luisa, the showrunner behind the Apple TV Plus show Shining Girls. So this is based on a novel by Lauren Bucas. I'm curious just what you connected with about that book and just what were the themes that resonate with you.
So I was a huge fan of the book when it came out in 2013, and for me, it was the blend of genres. So I thought she had done a really unique and clever mix of sci-fi and serial killer and true crime. It just felt like I'd never read anything like that before. But more importantly, it was really Kirby and her story, and the fact that Lauren had given so much voice and time to the victims and not just Harper.
Yeah. Well, in terms of sort of adapting those themes and the book, what was it that you wanted to maybe adjust to fit the format of a TV show? And then what parts did you just want to keep consistent with what the story was?
Um, in terms of adjusting, the biggest change from the book is that it's told almost entirely from Kirby's point of view. So the book is split between Harper and the other women, and I really felt like anchoring it in her point of view was going to give us a stronger pull into the show. And for me, since that was the character I connected with most, it felt like the easiest entry point. The only thing was, once I did that, um, what was so special about the book was that it had sci-fi elements, but all of those were tethered to Harper. So once I took him out and his point of view out, it's like, okay, well, how am I going to get that same experience if you're just with Kirby? So the shifting realities was something that I added. Her world keeps changing based on Harper's actions, and that also, to me, it felt like it was speaking to the themes in the book, which are dealing with trauma and the aftermath of trauma. So building out all of that mythology to help support that metaphor.
Well, speaking to those shifting realities, I think what's interesting about watching the show, just from a viewer standpoint, is there is kind of like a meta aspect where, her realities keep shifting and she's usually kind of in that disoriented feeling. And because of the way the show is structured and edited, that is also kind of true of my experience watching it and how others have experienced watching it. What was the balance there in terms of giving us that disorienting feeling, but also not being so overwhelming that like we have no idea what's happening?
That was one of the trickiest parts, especially about editing it. But the intention was that the
Mm.
viewer becomes completely subjective, so that you're with her along with it. When she figures out things, you're figuring out things. When she starts to get a stronger sense of herself, you are too. Um, but to your point, it's really difficult to calibrate. How much information is going to be enough for people? How and it's different for each person. For me, I love puzzles, so I definitely tried to add in little Easter eggs and things that if you went back on a second viewing you would appreciate. But hopefully, you are in the first couple episodes with her, you're disoriented, and then slowly as you keep going through the season, you can anchor yourself and start to understand things as she does.
Yeah, this definitely feels like a show that I've only watched it through once, but I feel like if I were to rewatch it, it would be very rewarding just to see it from the first episode. So, um, yeah, I'm also just curious just how you were able to keep track of the different realities and the timelines and whether anything changed just in the editing process as you were sort of figuring out how am I going to put all of this together.
um there's so many documents and
Yeah.
papers and just so every character had their own timeline, so it's like the only way to tell time is each person. There was like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for every single person, and then there was a global objective one, and then you also have the shifting realities, and so all of those had to have their own details. So just imagine like stacks of papers that everyone has to have and be aware of and check for continuity. In terms of the edit, once that's locked in, it's that you can't change. right? So it's like everyone has made production decisions, you know, what does her hair look like? What is her coffee cup? All that stuff. So you can't be like, oh, well, I'm just going to decide, no, that's going to be a different, that the shift didn't happen. The thing, it's more, how much do you want to emphasize something? So how much do you want to stay on the coffee cup so that audiences can be like, oh, did that change or not change? Those are the things that you can change more in post.
Hmm. Well, speaking more again to maybe producing side of it, how concerned were you with the kind of, genre trappings that we see in a crime drama, as far as, putting a new spin on it, or even using some of those just tried and true methods of what people tend to expect from a show like this?
That's one of the trickiest and most delicate aspects of the show. And I think,
Hmm.
there is violence against women in the show. And that's something we talked about a lot with all the directors, and just how much do you actually need to see? And it's much, much less than you would expect, because really the show lives in the aftermath of violence. It's not about glorifying or making it gratuitous or celebrating it. So for us, it's really just, what does that experience leave you with? At the same time, you can't not show it at all, because that also feels like you don't understand what the characters went through. So with all the directors, every time we knew there was going to be a couple attack scenes in the season, so we had very intense conversations about, okay, how are we approaching it? How are we shooting it? How are each of them a little bit different depending on the character? And then in the edit, really calibrating, how far can you pull back as much as possible?
It sounds like a very intense sort of balancing act.
Yeah, but I think it should be. I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
like to your point, I've seen so much of that, and
Hmm.
it's not what the show's about.
Right. Well, luckily you have a lot of great collaborators around you.
I
Also,
do.
of course, with Elisabeth
Phenomenal.
Moss, not only starring in the show, but is also a producer and a director. How would you describe just the kind of presence that she has on a set, and why she felt like the perfect fit to help lead this show?
She's fantastic on a set. I mean, it must be because she's been on sets for so long, but she brings an energy and a warmth, and the crew loves her. And I think that's, when she's directing, it's always really, really fun days. And obviously, the material does have some darker elements in it. So to be able to have levity on set is such an enormous, it's a saving, it just saves the day. In terms of, how she came onto the project, she was actually the first actress we went to for Kirby. And she was the dream, because it's such a hard role to play. You have to change your personality, different time periods, different parts of her life. You have to be a complete chameleon, and I just don't know anyone else but her that could have done it. And because she came so early onto the process, it was really nice, because we started to develop a really close relationship, where she could, as I was writing the season, she could help me, be a sounding board for Kirby, and watch the arc of Kirby actually get built as we were making it. So then when we're on set, she knows everything, right? We've been through the trenches together. We've built the show together. And so then you have an ally who actually understands what you're trying to do and why.
Hmm.
So
Well, it's interesting because there is a bit of a Handmaid's Tale connection here, where you not only have Elisabeth Moss, but also Madeline Brewer shows up later in the season. Really, really excellent final sort of arc that she has. Dana Reed is one of your directors. She's done multiple episodes of Handmaid's Tale. Maggie Phillips, your music supervisor. I mean, quite a few departments. I feel like you're sharing a lot of the same
Martha
people.
Sparrow,
Yeah,
our
exactly.
supervising art director, yeah.
Right. Can you
And all
talk
of
about
those,
maybe the connection there with
yeah,
these
I
two
mean,
shows?
so obviously, like, when you're starting to find people to join the production, everyone puts in names. And so a lot of those names came from Lizzie being like, they're awesome. They're going to be fantastic. They're perfect for the show. And then when we met them, we were like, oh, well, yes, for sure. And somebody like Dana, who turned out, she's a fantastic director, but it was really nice because they did have that relationship. And so she had directed Lizzie before. There was a shorthand there, and they were able to step into that relationship a lot more quickly.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you also have a really great cast even outside of Elisabeth Moss, Wagner Mora and Jamie Bell as sort of co-leads with her. Jamie Bell in particular is just scary good in what he's delivering in this role. Just curious about why the two of them sort of made sense to fill out the show.
It's been really interesting because so many people have been so surprised by Jamie's performance, and I think that that's the answer. When we first met with him about the role, it was like I thought I had one understanding of him as an actor going into it, and then when I saw him perform, I was like, oh wow, this is terrifying, because he has that boyish quality. He's charming, he feels vulnerable, you feel safe with him, and then he really can actually just turn it, and you're suddenly like, oh, this person's really, really dangerous, and I would have let them into my life. And so I think that the unexpectedness of him really helps you understand why Harper can even have any kind of level of engagement with these women.
Mm. And what about for Wagner Mora too?
He's fantastic. I love his performance in the show. We met with him, and he'd had a background in journalism. So he came to Dan with a really deep connection. He really wanted to play a reporter. He did a lot of research. So he talked to Sun-Times reporters. He actually went out with them, and he took notes on like what their day was like. And he just really committed to the role. And I had only seen him as Escobar in Narcos before, and to see that performance, and then this, it's a complete transformation. That's just a testament to how talented he is.
I did want to also highlight a few episodes and moments from the season where we have the big Harper episode in episode 6, where we get his big backstory and entirely focused on him. And it doesn't really reveal everything, but it does sort of start to illuminate just how he's doing what he's doing and also why he's doing it. Just curious, why did episode 6, like that deep into the season, feel like the right time to give us that information for him?
Well, it was really important to me to establish Kirby first, so that the beginning, for the first half of the season, the way it's structured is you're with her, you're disoriented, you're slowly starting to put things together, and he's a lot more of a shark character. He's he's a mystery. You don't understand him, you don't understand what's going on with him, but you can't sustain that forever, because if not, I mean, it's a TV show, and so at a certain point that becomes boring, and he's no longer a character. And so it felt like by the time you got to 6, you really wanted to understand more motivations. You wanted to understand how he's able to do this, what he's doing. And so that felt like the right time in the season, that you were close enough and you were with Kirby enough that you could break away and be with Harper.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the actual production, I'm also curious when it comes to those shifting realities. You have a lot of really just fascinating sequences that really are showcasing your editors and their work. But in something like the 4th episode in the laundromat, and it's Kirby and Harper and they're facing off, and you have like the breaking glass. Yeah. I would just love to know how that whole sequence came together.
That's Dana. So that she did a phenomenal job directing that sequence. I mean, something like that, you have to plan it out both. It's almost entirely done practically. So that is another piece. We had one location, you have to have a wall that they can actually go through. The glass, obviously that part is VFX, but everything else, we did practical. And so for something like that, you have the fight, you have the character beats plotted out in the script. And then she works with, stunt team to make sure everybody's safe. Then they rehearse it with the actors for a long time to make sure they have all the movements down. It takes a lot of planning to get something like that as right as it came out. I was really, really happy with it.
Yeah, it's very impressive, I must say. Yeah. Well, I mean, just overall, sort of going back to how you're presenting the show, it's this very interesting balancing act where you're making a show that is about the effects of trauma and brutality but also through the lens of, you know, sci-fi and time travel and reality shifting sort of on the entertainment level. So I guess I'm just curious how you were able to find the balance there of sort of making a show that is very entertaining and gripping for the viewer, but then also trying to tell a story that has a larger point to it at the same time.
I think that's the only way to tell those kinds of stories. It's really hard to get people to want to engage with something that feels like medicine. You know, even as a viewer, I want to have, at the end of the day, it's been a long day and you want to just sit with something that kind of sweeps you away. And so for me, you know, mystery, thrills, like amazing action sequences, like the fight in the laundromat, those are the things that it's like the sugar that keeps you coming back and engaging with the show, so that you actually can connect with the characters and can talk about these things without it feeling like a lesson.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, this is also, from what I understand, this is your first time leading a show as the showrunner, which is a wild first choice for your first show, honestly, with all these, it seems like a lot. But what kind of
wild.
yeah, well,
In a
I
good
mean,
way.
yeah, good. Well, what kind of lessons did you learn just from the process that maybe you didn't anticipate ahead of time?
Don't do time travel.
Okay.
No, I think the most important is to pick your partners really well, because at the end of the day, I was working on the show for 5 years. And so it's like, you're really with these people for a long time, and you need support. You need other people to advocate for you. It's a group effort. And so I think making sure that you find collaborators that are going to have your back is really, really important. I got very lucky in that.
Yeah, you certainly did. And unfortunately, we're out of time. But for those of you watching, subscribe for more interviews and go to goldderby.com to make your Emmy predictions. Thank you so much, Silka.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.